Now, for our next session, I'm absolutely thrilled to get the regulator's perspective on innovation and collaboration. Now, with me today is Shupui Lee, advisor to His Excellency the Governor of the Central Bank of the UAE, and Kwok, Senior Executive Director within the Financial Services Regulatory Authority of ADGM. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today. Now, this morning, we were able to get a taste of the digital lab and its many use cases. We learned how it will fit within the innovation strategy of our founding partner banks and how fintechs, both local but also international, and their investors see the platform as a value add-on tool. Now, for this discussion in particular, I'm especially excited to have you both on because generally, bottom-up community initiatives are often given more applause than top-down approaches. It just seems to be the way things are. And I think it's because the narrative simply sticks better to, the founder's myth of overcoming obstacles, breaking down barriers, and triumphing over the status quo. But if we didn't feel that a top-down push was so crucial to, building a sustainable and inclusive innovation ecosystem, well, quite frankly, none of us would be here, right? So it's all about finding this harmony. And to really kick it off and learn more about this and more about this topic, I'm going to start with one question in particular. Now, it's clear that the rule book, right, it can't be revisited that often. Otherwise, it would make for a very unstable business and judicial environment. So my first question is going to be directed at Shupui. How do you balance the need to be agile, all the while committing to, long-term decisions?
Okay, it's a very good question, to be honest. If you look at the development of Sandbox in the last 4 to 5 years, we see a lot of changes along the journey. At the very beginning, going back like 5 years ago, people just talk about Sandbox and then let the fintech firms or the financial institutions come into the central bank or the regulatory authority to try out some ideas. All these are paper-based. Okay, they submit a document and then the regulators say, okay, go ahead and come back with your result and we take a look. We allow you to do certain things. But now you come to today, what we are proposing to do between the central bank and ADGM together, we move to a big step forward. It's kind of agile approach. Okay, number one, we make it interactive. During the process, the regulators are part of the process. We go together with the fintech companies and also the financial institutions, either banks or insurance company, whatever. And then we provide interactive feedback, comments, and also advice during the process. Because what they struggle is they don't understand the regulatory requirements. They're very good at tech and solutions. But coming to regulatory requirements, they probably have a lot of problems in terms of understanding. That's one thing. I think the second major achievement of this process is they're not doing a paper-based desktop kind of development. Now they're coming to a real environment with a digital sandbox that allow them to really put their solutions in a more realistic or real environment to speak of. And that make it more interactive in a way, not only the regulators, but with the machines together, and they can see the result immediately. So I think that's kind of agile approach that we are talking, not really a top-down, is actually interactive process.
Okay, interesting. So I see that you're really pushing more for the aspect of going from a paper-based approach to going down an interactive route with multiple participants. Did I get that right?
Kind of. You're right. You mentioned about multiple participants. That's another problem we have gone through the journey before. Because if you want to really test some solutions with multiple participants, none of the financial institutions are willing to open up their environment to allow other competitors to come in. So they need a neutral third-party environment to facilitate that. On a paper-based environment, easy. People sit on a table and talk about the journey and the potential results. But now we give them a real environment with different participants going into that environment. That's another, I would say that's a third achievement as well.
Fantastic. Wailun, can I ask you to comment on what agility means for you.
As a regulator, we tend to struggle with that concept of agility. As a public sector organization, you're right that it has to be in our institutional character to think and set policies for the long term. So indeed, it should not be the case that we have to amend our rules and regulations too often. But being an agile regulator, while it is a challenge for us to manage, need not be a self-contradiction. If the regulator is too slow to change, our regulatory policies and rules will bear little resemblance to market reality. We will have difficulties attracting and retaining talent, and our role will be irrelevant. On the other hand, if we are too much like the private sector, we'll lose its essential institutional character and credibility. So we want the best of both worlds, but to achieve that, I think we have to do a few things fundamentally right. Firstly, we need to actively develop the relevant domain expertise and build up in-house institutional knowledge. Oftentimes, the ability to decide and move fast boils down to experience and judgment calls. The most direct way of acquiring and building sophistication and domain expertise is through the hiring process, of course. But in truth, finding a talent that has the requisite combination of skills and knowledge in the finance, technology, and regulatory space is difficult. So we need to put in place the right tools and governance structure to help us build the relevant domain expertise. Should we touch about the regulatory sandbox and the digital lab? It's one good example. Right? We test out the innovation, understand the risk, put in place regulatory controls, and where the risks are too high, we will have to rein in the activity. So that's one. Secondly, because of the need to move and decide fast to be agile regulator, the margin of error actually becomes tighter. We need to have a robust governance structure of checks and balances to ensure we tap on the collective wisdom of the management team and the decisions we make are accountable. But is the committee of wise men enough? I don't think any department in the regulator has a vastly superior insight to the practitioners in the industry. And that leads to my third point. We need a mechanism to engage and listen intently to market and industry participants. We need collaboration between the regulator and industry. Without the help of the regulator to steer the long-term direction, progress will be very difficult, but without the participation of the private sector, of the financial institutions and individuals, the result will likely be distorted. And finally, innovation and transformation is not about technology. To be an agile regulator is about the mindset and culture. Having an open mind to try new things and the humility to learn from the industry is, in my opinion, the key differentiating factor to becoming a more sophisticated fintech regulator. And just like a cyclist, to keep our balance, we have to keep pedaling. There's no rest, and it requires continuous effort. The moment we stop learning and trying, we will lose relevance.
I mean, that's a lot to unpack. You mentioned a risk-based approach. You mentioned having appropriate checks and balances. You mentioned evidently having a very collaborative approach with the industry as a whole, but ultimately also staying open to the market, what's happening, and keeping abreast of new developments. So that leads me to my next question, which is very, very short. It's very small, and I'm going to direct this back at Shue Pui. Should regulators even innovate? Is it their place?
Why not? Okay, now we are talking SupTech, RegTech. Okay, not only FinTech. And the regulators cannot sit back and do nothing and just tell the industry, you got to go move ahead. So I totally agree. We also need to move together. Number one, okay, we also need to use technology to facilitate or help our day-to-day work. Without that, I mean, I can't see how we really do effective regulation or supervision going forward, given all this technological development, number one. And number two, we need to understand the technological movement before we can actually effectively or efficiently regulate the market. So definitely, yes, my answer. Yeah.
That's an answer I like to hear. Why would you like to add on to that?
Without a doubt, I think we have to innovate, otherwise we'll be left behind. My personal philosophy to innovation is to always look at the benefits of what the innovative idea can bring. Try even we may not be fully sure, but work diligently to understand it, and then look at ways to address the risk and issues that come with it. If we can't find the answers to the risk, we can then bury the idea. But at least we are giving the idea a chance. If we were to make sure we have all the answers to the risk before we start, I doubt we will ever start. We had earlier mentioned how our regulatory sandbox has helped us acquire the know-how and confidence to put in place a diverse suite of regulatory frameworks, catering to a diverse range of digital financial services. And now with the Digital Lab, we will have a tool to accelerate our R&D and adoption of technology for our regulatory purposes. We want to be able to better supervise technology through leveraging technology, as Shu Pui mentioned. With the Digital Lab, we want to host innovation challenges to source for RegTech solutions for our own use, as well as RegTech solutions to address pain points in the industry. In this way, we can achieve better regulatory outcomes and a safer financial system through better ways of regulating financial firms and markets, while reducing regulatory burden for the regulated entities.
Okay. Very, very cool. I mean, just hearing you guys both speak, and also you two have a wealth of experience with years and years in regulation. Now, I hadn't thought about this question originally, but now hearing you both talk, it can be a quick answer, quick shot fire answers. How do you see the next generation of regulators? Like, where will you be able to get these sort of talents? Will we need technology people? Wailun, you can answer quickly, and then I'm gonna jump over.
Sure. I mentioned earlier that we find the right combination of regulatory technology and financial knowledge. It's going to be very, very tough, right? But definitely because of the predominance of technology in fintech, we do have to hire experts in the technological field. The issue of assimilating them into our regulatory culture is a separate issue. It's a challenge for us to manage. But definitely technology, we are in our practices nowadays, when we hire people, we do hire 1 or 2 technology experts among us. And I think that has to be the norm going forward.
Fantastic. Shu Pui, any thoughts on this? What does the next generation of regulator look like?
Okay, I would not say we need all technology experts, but we need all regulators to be able to understand technology and understand the risk and the implications. So in a way, they need to have the basic knowledge and also how to apply technologies, but they don't need to be a technological experts. That's my view.
Okay, awesome. Great to hear. Now, Shu Pui, stay with me because the next question is going to be aimed at you. Can you tell us a little bit more about the initiatives that are currently being worked on to nurture the ecosystem? What's currently happening?
You're talking about the central bank.
Yes, that's aimed at you.
Okay.
Tell us what you guys are doing.
All right. Okay. As you know, we announced during the last year FinTech Abu Dhabi Festival, we have set up a FinTech office, and we have about 90 initiatives going on. Okay, I'm not going to go through every single of them, but a few key projects I would like to mention. Okay, for example, the multiple central bank digital currency bridge project with China, Hong Kong, and Thailand under the sort of sponsorship of BIS. And that's a very exciting project. And what we plan to do is to build a kind of global CBDC platform to allow all 4 jurisdictions to put through cross-border payments using CBDC. And also that will cover foreign exchange transactions, capital market transaction, to handle trade settlement and even capital market transaction as well. And also we are thinking to put in line, for example, forward contracts, FX contract, to facilitate kind of trade settlement, international trade settlement. So that's a very exciting project, and hopefully we will complete everything by end of this year. And we are not thinking only for a proof of concept. We are thinking the possibility to get real in future. Okay, so let's wait until end of this year. What will be the decision among all these 4 central banks? And then we also have the national payment system strategy implementation. We are planning to build an instant payment platform for the country as a whole to facilitate all payments among institutions, individuals, corporations on a 24/7 real-time manner, i.e. among 10 seconds, people can make transfer from one account to another account, either cross banks or cross wallets or exchange houses. And also we will have a number of facilities like direct debit and direct debit authorization, request to pay, addressing scheme, etc., etc. So that's another exciting project. I think I named one more. We are working with the industry together is actually facilitating industry to build a DLT trade finance platform. I understand is at the UAT stage now. Hopefully in 2-3 months time, the production launch will happen to facilitate the trade finance process to avoid any duplicate financing, fraud, and also streamline some of the trade financing process. And potentially, we are talking with another central bank about possible connectivity. Okay, but that's another step. I don't want to mention too much because it's a bit too aggressive at this stage. But there will be a lot of exciting projects coming up in next 6 to 12 months.
Well, I mean, that sounds great. And I'm especially surprised by the number. You said 90 initiatives? That's huge. It's huge.
We don't get free lunch here, you know.
Do you sleep?
I do.
Good. We need you for those 90 projects. Wiley, going back to you now, evidently we're here because it's the Digital Lab Demo Day, so we're evidently very, very excited about the Digital Lab and its implications. Can you tell us a little bit more, not just about the Digital Lab and where you see that as a way of nurturing and really bringing the ecosystem together, but also maybe anything else that is happening that you're excited about?
Sure. In the GCC region, the need to accelerate the digital transformation agenda has steadily become an important focus of many financial institutions and banks. In the UAE, banks have traditionally relied on in-house development to advance the agenda, but such an approach may not be enough to keep pace with market demand and consumer needs accelerated in today's situation. Collaboration with fintechs would be a more sustainable way, I think. That said, when it comes to actual implementation, the banks are faced with a few challenges. Until recently, with the when the central bank fintech office was set up, the banks do not really have a dedicated channel to engage the regulators on testing new ideas and technology. But now there is a formalized structure for banks to seek the guidance and participation of the central bank. So that is a very significant development with the establishment of the fintech office. Then there are also the issues of not knowing where to look for fintechs, especially if you're just starting on an innovation journey. The lack of a safe and conducive environment for banks to test before procurement. And then this is where Digital Lab will be a tremendous enabler. It is not just a testing ground, but also a marketplace to find partners in the digital community. It serves to mobilize the efforts by fintechs in a systematic fashion and allow banks to engage meaningfully in the experimentation and procurement of innovative solutions. So we have been in discussions with the CBUAE for a while now to pilot the co-sandboxing program, where the banks can make use of the Digital Lab to facilitate demonstration and experimentation with the CBUAE and ADGM. Under the co-sandboxing program, the banks will submit an online application, which will be jointly evaluated by the participating regulators. For more details, you can reach out to us in the Digital Lab portal. But to promote collaboration and facilitate the safe connectivity of financial institutions and fintechs in the Digital Lab, I'm glad to inform that we have just launched our open finance framework to regulate fintech firms working with banks and financial institutions on open finance solutions and ensure data of the customers are handled in a secure manner and the systems of the financial institutions are properly safeguarded.
Awesome. Very, very nice. I'm sure a lot of the audience are very excited by all those projects that you've listed. Now, earlier on in the morning, actually, we had a bit of a session with some fintech startups as well as with investors. And something that routinely came back was the idea of passporting. So as you know, startups, particularly startups in the UAE and startups in the region, they don't want to be UAE startups. They want to be regional GCC powerhouses. Right from the get-go, they're thinking big, and so I guess one of the big questions is how can there be collaboration amongst regulator-type peers fundamentally? Because if the startups are looking to be regulated in one jurisdiction, they want to be able to passport that across to other jurisdictions. How are you coordinating with your peers to essentially facilitate cross-border expansion? And can I bring this question back to you, Shupui, because you mentioned that you were working with a number of other central banks on some of these initiatives. How do you see that happening?
In fact, it's happening, but I see challenges. Okay. In fact, both Wailam and the central bank and my team, we have participated in the GFIN. Okay. And then I understand we have been referred at least about 17 or even to 20 applications from overseas. Okay. I won't say it's 100% passporting, but at least there's some process in place to allow these foreign firms have a chance to come to the UAE and get access to the regulatory system or framework or even our sandbox to try out their solutions. Okay. But the challenge is I will see in future or even now, because we have different regulatory framework and requirements, without any alignments among all these jurisdictions. Even, ADGM and central bank, in terms of payments, we also have different requirements. So we need some alignment before the passporting can really happen. If we have different requirements, there will be potential regulatory arbitrage. That may not be good for the market as a whole. So I think the next step, probably globally or even within the UAE, different regulators need to sit down and work out how can we align different regulatory requirements. If we can do this, this is a major step forward. Then we can look for the passporting issues and how we can address that and make it happen. So it's happening, but I still see quite a lot of challenges facing us.
I mean, when you put it that way and you bring up the point of regulatory arbitrage, it doesn't sound great, but it's good to know that people are aligning on that front. William, can I get your thoughts on this?
Sure. No, I echo Shupui's views. To facilitate safe adoption and deployment in an increasingly connected market, cooperation among global regulators and innovation hubs is imperative. It is important for regulators to come together to adopt common standards, common approaches in terms of addressing concerns such as even data privacy and fraud, let alone regulatory arbitrage. We need to think of suitable infrastructures and legislative frameworks so that data can be safely shared across jurisdictions to enhance cross-border trade activities and the supervision of the underlying financial transactions. For instance, ADGM recently enacted the Electronic Transactions Regulations in February this year to allow the use of transferable documents and negotiable instruments such as bills of lading and bills of exchange in electronic form, becoming only the third jurisdiction in the world to do so. We see the value proposition and benefits that such a legislative framework can bring, especially in the space of cross-border trade, to facilitate the exchange and deployability of electronic transferable records and negotiable instruments between countries. So we are looking around the world to see which other jurisdictions have similar regulations, because Shupui underlined the importance of having common regulations. So we are now in discussion with potential jurisdiction to do POCs on such transferable documents such as bills of lading, promissory notes, and so forth. So in this regard, we hope that the Digital Lab will enable regulators to better connect, test and supervise the cross-border deployment of innovative financial services. We are currently working on how federal regulators can participate and utilize the enlarged virtual environment in the digital lab to run, say, cold sandboxing programs, right? With the ultimate aim of enabling firms to carry out simultaneous testing in multiple jurisdictions, making cross-border compliance easier. The pilot between CPUAE and ADGM hopefully will provide valuable insights and lessons that we can use to scale.
Perfect. And I think that leads me on straight to, well, actually my final question. Wailum, stay with me for this. And then after I'll head back to Shupui. How can, the founders and fintech, well, not just startups, but even outside of fintech, how can startups and ecosystem partners, regardless of in what industry or regardless of whether they're banks or financial institutions or startups, how can they engage in a better dialogue with you? It doesn't have to be you particularly, but at least your office.
Right. I think our doors are always open. Our contact details are available on the digital lab portal. Hopefully, after today's sessions, you have the faces to our name, to the names. With the official launch of the digital marketplace today, you can now seek out like-minded community partners, projects, and deployment opportunities in the UAE. You can create profiles, showcase your products and services, seek investors and business opportunities. You will know about the innovation challenges and hackathons that the community members run on the digital marketplace, which gives you an opportunity to deploy your solution with participating financial institutions. Right? So register online now. Just Google ADGM Digital Lab and be part of the fintech community.
Fantastic. I mean, that is a fantastic call to the audience. If anybody wants to be on, you are welcome to register straight away. It's launched. It's there. Get on. And now to go back to Shupui, how can people enter into a dialogue with you? Evidently, you have a very clear vision of the ecosystem and where it's heading and how it's going. How can people get their feedback back to you, and how can you engage in this? How can they engage in a dialogue with you in your office?
Right. That's one of the key purposes that we set up a fintech office, because I start my role with the Central Bank UAE back to like 2.5 years ago. Even when I came in, if I have an issue, I try to find a relevant department or people to kind of clarify certain things. I struggled. Okay, not easy. Even with internal staff within the Central Bank UAE. So the key purpose, one of the key purposes of the Central Bank FinTech office is to set up a single point of contact from an external perspective. So if you come to the FinTech office, we have a web page. If you go to our website, the Central Bank website, you'll find a section on the FinTech office with contact details. And then you can communicate with the FinTech office directly. And then depending on the questions or the areas you want to cover, definitely we will direct you to the right departments or people, or if that's part of the fintech office areas, that we definitely will respond directly. The next step, because it takes a bit of time for our communication department to help build the website. The next step, what I want to do is make it more interactive. It's not one way. They put up a query or a question to us, then we work on that and then go back to them. And I'm thinking to build a kind of chat room kind of thing. We open up to in certain period, so we can have more interactive dialogue with the external parties. But it will not happen immediately. That's the next step we want to build on our website to make it more interactive. So eventually, we also want to, have events and other workshops, whatever, through the kind of web communication engine. So, but that will be sometime going forward. Okay, but at the moment, definitely we have a single point of contact. Come to the web page, you will find us, and then we definitely will respond as soon as possible, as quickly as possible.
Fantastic. I guess, for our audience, right now we have two things to take out from this. There are two things you need to Google. One, the CBUAE FinTech office. That's your single point of contact if you want to get in touch. And then number two, of course, the ADGM Digital Lab. Great. Well, that summarizes our session. Gentlemen, it was fantastic to have you here. It was fantastic to hear your thoughts. Thank you for being so open and sharing this information with the audience. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.